Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take a look at the mystical visions and gnosis of one of our most celebrated science fiction authors, Philip K. Dick. These form one of the most fascinating and complex aspects of his life. His visions led him to believe that the reality most people take for granted is, in fact, an illusion, a construct hiding a deeper, more authentic existence. Just a few years ago, such ideas would have seemed foreign to all, but a very few. But today, more and more people are beginning to suspect, and often even understand, that there's much more to reality than meets the eye. Dick's insights shaped much of his later work, filling his novels with questions about perception, identity, and the nature of existence itself. He was the author of, among many others, the novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, that later became the first Blade Runner movie. In February and March of 1974, a period he later referred to as 2374, Dick underwent a series of intense mystical experiences that radically altered his understanding of reality. The catalyst for these experiences was a routine dental procedure during which he was given sodium pentothal. Not long after, while recovering at home, a delivery person from a pharmacy arrived to bring him additional pain medication. She wore a pendant in the shape of a fish, a symbol used by early Christians. As the sunlight reflected off the pendant, Dick was struck by what he described as a pink beam of light, an overwhelming force of knowledge and awareness that seemed to enter his mind directly. He referred to this moment as anamnesis, a term from Plato meaning the recollection of innate knowledge, as if something had been unlocked in his consciousness. In fact, this type of experience is not uncommon among people going through a spiritual awakening. An external event triggers something inside that suddenly makes one see through the veil that usually separates us from perceiving the true nature of reality. There is here a sudden knowing beyond words, concepts, and normal everyday experiences. It is also often described as if something is being unlocked. What can be good to know here is that there is a difference between our actual experiences and our attempts at interpreting and making sense of them. Furthermore, it's also important to point out that the experiences in themselves may be filtered, as we are tapping into knowledge far beyond the mind's capability to perceive, conceptualize, and understand. This knowledge, basically without exception, gets distorted by our own belief systems, wounds, and general programming. This is, by the way, something that, in general, is a good thing to keep in mind when we take part in different types of esoteric information or viewpoints. With that being said, what followed upon the initial event was a cascade of visions and insights. Dick began to perceive what he believed were parallel realities overlapping with the present. One of the most striking revelations was that the world he knew, the modern everyday reality, was an illusion masking a much older, hidden reality. He saw himself as simultaneously existing in 1974 and in ancient Rome, during the time of early Christians. This wasn't simply a hallucination. To Dick, it was as if history itself had been altered or layered, with modern civilization being merely a continuation of the Roman Empire in disguise. He looked at time itself as an illusion, and suggested that the linear progression of history is a false construct, and that in some fundamental way, the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Nowadays, you can see this view echoed in both modern spiritual teachings as well as in some schools of quantum physics. From this experience, Dick developed the concept of the black iron prison, an idea deeply influenced by Gnostic thought. He saw this prison as an invisible, yet all-encompassing structure that kept humanity trapped in a false reality, controlled by forces that sought to obscure the truth. This prison wasn't physical, but psychological and spiritual, a system of control that ensured people never realized their true nature. But his experiences weren't purely about oppression and illusion. Alongside the Black Iron Prison, he also encountered what he called the Palm Tree Garden, a vision of liberation and spiritual awakening. The contrast between these two states of being became a core part of his worldview. Reality was a battlefield between forces of deception and forces of revelation. One of the most striking aspects of his visions was his sense that a divine intelligence was guiding him. He referred to this entity in multiple ways: VALIS, which is an acronym for Vast Active Living Intelligence System, and Zebra, or the Logos, a cosmic consciousness that intervened in human affairs, revealing hidden truths and offering glimpses of a greater, interconnected reality. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for Dick that his experiences weren't purely delusional came when he received what he believed was medical knowledge through one of these visions. He suddenly became aware that his young son had a previously undiagnosed inguinal hernia. Urging his wife to take their son to a doctor, he found that the diagnosis was confirmed, something that, for him, was further proof that he had accessed a source of knowledge beyond normal human perception. In the years following 2374, Dick dedicated himself to deciphering what had happened to him. His Exegesis, an 8,000-page document, is his attempt to make sense of these experiences. He explored countless theories, from Gnosticism to quantum mechanics, from Jungian psychology to the possibility that he had received messages from an advanced alien intelligence. He never settled on a single explanation, but instead engaged in an ongoing dialogue with himself, constantly questioning and refining his understanding. His later novels, particularly VALIS, The Divine Invasion, and Radio Free Albemuth, are direct explorations of these experiences, fictionalized but deeply personal. Through these works, he presents characters who, like himself, receive sudden bursts of knowledge, come to realize the artificial nature of reality, and seek to break free from the illusion. His fiction became a means of working through his own experiences, offering readers a glimpse into the mind of someone grappling with the nature of existence itself. At times, Dick questioned whether he had experienced a form of psychosis, but he also resisted purely psychological explanations. He was acutely aware of the fine line between mystical experience and mental illness, but the depth and coherence of his insights led him to believe that something more was at play. He remained open to multiple interpretations, recognizing that no single framework, scientific, religious, or philosophical, could fully encapsulate what had happened to him. This skeptical, clear-minded stance is something that you generally don't find among psychotics. Philip K. Dick's search for answers never truly ended. Until his death in 1982, he remained caught between certainty and doubt, constantly re-evaluating his experiences, questioning whether they were revelations from a higher intelligence or the product of a mind that had glimpsed something beyond its limits. His ability to hold multiple, often contradictory perspectives at once was one of his defining traits. He could entertain the idea that he had been contacted by a divine intelligence one day, and the next he would consider the possibility that he had simply suffered a neurological episode triggered by stress, medication, or a latent psychological condition. Yet, despite his uncertainty, there was an undeniable conviction in the way he spoke about the nature of reality. He believed that, at the very least, human perception was incomplete, that what we see, hear, and experience is just a fragment of something much larger. The Black Iron Prison was not just an abstract metaphor for political control or social conditioning, it was a lived reality for him, a way to articulate the sense that something was fundamentally wrong with the world, that people were trapped without realizing it. He saw parallels between his ideas and ancient Gnostic beliefs, which held that the material world was a deception, created by a lesser false god to keep humanity ignorant of its true divine origins. This idea that humanity is asleep, unaware of its true nature, runs through much of his later work. His novels are filled with characters who begin to suspect that the world around them is a carefully constructed illusion, that they are living inside a simulation or a dream, or that their memories have been tampered with. In Ubik, reality itself begins to break down, revealing hidden layers beneath. In a scanner, darkly, the protagonist loses track of his own identity, becoming a stranger to himself. In the VALIS trilogy, a character based on Dick experiences a direct transmission of divine knowledge, much like Dick's own encounter with the pink beam. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of his experiences is how they mirror a much broader human dilemma. Throughout history, mystics, philosophers, and scientists alike have asked the same fundamental questions. What is real? How do we know what we know? Are we perceiving the world as it truly is, or only as our senses allow us to? These questions, which occupied thinkers from Plato to Descartes, to modern physicists exploring the nature of consciousness, found a home in Dick's work, not as dry intellectual exercises, but as visceral, personal experiences. In our times, many feel that they have found a satisfying, affirmative answer to the question of whether reality is some kind of illusion. Many are instead asking themselves, what does it mean that reality is an illusion? What is the nature of the illusion? What is behind the illusion? And what are the consequences of knowing that it is an illusion? Dick sometimes described reality as a kind of live-action hologram, where the past was superimposed over the present, making it appear as though things had changed when, in fact, they had not. To him, the structures of control that existed under Rome, the suppression of knowledge, the enforcement of rigid social hierarchies, the use of power to keep people docile, had persisted throughout history, merely changing shape and form. What people saw as progress, he sometimes suspected, was just a more sophisticated version of the same old system of oppression. If the black iron prison was the cage, then VALIS, or the Logos, or Zebra, was the key. Dick believed that this entity, whatever it was, had been trying to awaken him, and by extension, all of humanity. He saw his experiences not as something unique to him, but as part of a broader phenomenon, one that might have happened to others throughout history, hidden beneath different names and cultural interpretations. Religious prophets, mystics, visionaries, were they all, in some sense, experiencing what he had? Was the divine intelligence reaching out to humanity at various points in time, trying to shake people awake from their illusions? In other words, decades before simulation theory became a topic of mainstream discussion, Dick was already entertaining the notion that our reality might be a construct, one that could be altered, manipulated, or even dissolved altogether. This idea, explored in his novels like The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch and Time Out of Joint, has since become a serious topic in scientific and philosophical circles, with thinkers like Nick Bostrom proposing that if advanced civilizations are capable of running simulated worlds, it is statistically likely that we are already living inside one. But, as we have seen, Dick's visions were not just about cosmic deception. There was also an element of hope. The very fact that he had been able to glimpse beyond the illusion suggested that escape was possible, that the black iron prison, for all its strength, was not absolute. His experiences with the pink beam, with Zebra, with VALIS, all pointed to the possibility that there was a force actively working against the deception, trying to awaken humanity from its slumber. At times, Dick entertained the idea that this force had always been present in human history, operating in the background, subtly nudging people toward enlightenment. He wondered whether certain moments in history, religious awakenings, scientific breakthroughs, philosophical revolutions, were the result of this intelligence making contact with receptive minds. The discovery of fire, the invention of language, the emergence of consciousness itself, Were these all carefully placed interventions, guiding humanity along a predetermined path? An interesting parenthesis worth noting is that the Croatian inventor Nikola Tesla, who pioneered the generation transmission and use of alternating current electricity, claimed that he had received knowledge from extraterrestrial sources. Whatever the case may be regarding the sources of his experiences, Philip K. Dick never found a definitive answer. His exegesis is a testament to his relentless questioning, his refusal to accept simple explanations, his willingness to live in uncertainty. He did not settle on one single interpretation of his experiences because he understood that reality, whatever it truly is, resists easy categorization. He was willing to hold multiple, even contradictory, ideas at once, recognizing that the mystery itself was just as important as any potential solution. What remains undeniable is the influence his experiences had, not just on his own life, but on the broader culture. His ideas, once dismissed as the eccentric musings of a science fiction writer, have since gained remarkable relevance. As touched upon a moment ago, the themes he explored, simulation theory, the nature of perception, the question of free will, the possibility of hidden intelligences shaping our reality, have found their way into philosophy, neuroscience, artificial intelligence research, and even mainstream discussions of reality itself. In summary, Philip K. Dick's mystical experiences led him to believe that reality was an illusion, a construct he called the Black Iron Prison, designed to keep humanity unaware of a hidden truth. His 374 visions, triggered by a pink beam of light after a dental procedure, convinced him that time was an illusion, the Roman Empire had never truly ended, and a higher intelligence, VALIS, was secretly working to awaken humanity. Through his exegesis and novels like VALIS, he explored these revelations, questioning perception, free will, and the nature of existence. His ideas continue to challenge how reality is understood. Drawing on this last statement, it would serve us well to put things into perspective. We often fail to see the conclusions that can be drawn from, for example, the evolution of technology. 5 years ago, many would have considered the type of artificial intelligence that we have today to be impossible. And 30 years ago, many would not have envisioned that we, in the future, would be able to produce computer graphics that look real. It ought to make us at least curious about what else might be possible to construe, such as, for example, a virtual reality that, in every way, appears real. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a reality inside a computer. Computers may simply be a reflection of something much grander. These are just speculations, of course, and one has good reason to be wary of making too much of speculations. However, by viewing the times that we are living in through the lens of the experiences of a famous science fiction writer, we can, for a moment, step outside of the mind's need for certainty and instead simply allow what we are taking in to challenge what we think we know. And wherever you are on your own awakening journey, the question, what do I truly know about the nature of reality, deserves some serious thought. And once we've completely ruled out the strictly materialist perspective, it follows logically that, until we know more, anything is possible. Finally, if you want to delve deeper into questions of identity and the nature of reality, we have videos on these topics that are visible on the end screen right now. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.